Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is about a murder room that no one sleeps in. The story behind it and why people don't sleep in this room will shock you. Make sure to watch the whole video and let us know what you think about this case in the comments below. We all need a place to call home, a place where we can feel safe and secure. It's our sanctuary, our refuge from the outside world. But what if your home was the very thing that was endangering your life? Imagine coming home every day to the thought that at any moment you could be killed. That's a terrifying prospect, isn't it? Well, for the residents of 7 Ritherton Street, London, it's a very real possibility. That's because their homes are built over a murder room that has never been cleaned. The room is located at 26 Blomfield Road in Notting Hill, London, and it's the site of a brutal axe murder that took place in 1908. The victim was a young woman named Elizabeth Maud Cooper, who was just 23 years old when she was killed. Her body still lies in the room where she was murdered, and it's said that her ghost still haunts the building. But how did Elizabeth end up dead in this room, and why has her body never been removed? Well, the story goes back to the early 1900s. At the time, London was a very different place. The city was rapidly industrializing, and there was a growing divide between the rich and the poor. Elizabeth lived with her family in a small tenement building in Notting Hill, which was a notoriously dangerous neighborhood. On the morning of October 1908, Elizabeth was alone in the house. Her mother and sister had gone out for the day, and her father was out at work. She had been expecting a visitor, a man named Horace Macian, who was a Polish immigrant and a cobbler by trade. But when he arrived at the house, he was let in by mistake and fell down the stairs. Elizabeth came to help him, but he became enraged and attacked her with an axe. He then dragged her into a spare bedroom and continued to hack at her until she was dead. Then he tried to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, stealing some money and jewelry before fleeing the scene. The police were quickly on the case, and they soon arrested a man named Francis Tumblety, who was a known criminal and had a history of violence against women. He was convicted of the murder and sentenced to death by hanging. But as it turned out, Tumblety was innocent. He had been in prison for another crime at the time of the murder and had an airtight alibi. As it turned out, the real killer was Horace Macian, and he was eventually caught and sent to prison for life. But here's the thing. When the police searched the house where Elizabeth had been murdered, they couldn't find her body. It was nowhere to be seen. They ended up finding the body in the spare bedroom, hidden under some clothes. To this day, no one knows how the body got there or why it was hidden. Some believe that Elizabeth's killer, Horace Macian, was the one who moved the body, while others believe that someone else was responsible. Whatever the truth may be, the fact remains that the body was never recovered from the murder room, and that's not because the police didn't want to. It was simply too late. The house had already been sold and the new owner had boarded up the room where the murder had taken place, so the body was left where it lay. It's not clear exactly why the body was never removed, but it's likely due to a combination of factors. For one thing, the room was in a state of disrepair, and it would have been difficult and expensive to access the body without causing further damage to the building. Additionally, the house was located in a poor neighborhood, and the people who lived there were unexactly eager to draw attention to themselves. Finally, there was also a certain amount of fear involved. After all, no one wanted to disturb the body of a murder victim. Whatever the reason, the fact that Elizabeth's body was never removed meant that her ghost was free to roam the halls of the house, and soon enough, strange things began to happen. The first person to move into the house after the murder was a man named William West, who was a retired police officer. He and his wife moved in with their 2 daughters and son-in-law, and they had no idea that they were sharing their home with a ghost. For the first few months, everything seemed fine, but as the weeks went by, strange things began to happen. Objects would go missing and then reappear in strange places. Doors would open and close on their own, and sometimes William would even hear the sound of footsteps in the attic above him. At first, he and his family tried to ignore these things, but as they became more frequent, they became more concerned. Then one night, William was awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of screams. He got out of bed and went to investigate, but he couldn't find anything. Was it just a dream? He went back to bed, but the screams started again and he went to check again. This time, he noticed that the door to the spare bedroom was slightly ajar. He pushed it open and stepped inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. The room was empty except for a rocking chair that was moving by itself. William was terrified. He ran out of the room and locked himself in his bedroom. From that night on, he refused to go anywhere near the spare bedroom, and his family did the same. It was not long before the story of the haunted house spread, and no one wanted to live there. William and his family moved out as quickly as they could, and the house was abandoned for several years. During that time, the ghost of Elizabeth Cooper continued to roam the halls, and the house became known as the Ghost House. Eventually, the house was purchased by a man named David Miller, who was a successful businessman. He was intrigued by the story of the haunted house, and he decided to make it his home. Before he moved in, he had the spare bedroom sealed off, so that he wouldn't have to worry about the ghost. But he soon realized that that was a mistake. As it turned out, the ghost was everywhere in the house. David began experiencing strange phenomena throughout the house, and he knew that he had to do something. He reached out to a priest, Father Hugh, who came to the house to perform an exorcism. Father Hugh spent several days in the house, and during that time, he uncovered the dark secret that was hiding in plain sight. He discovered that the room that Elizabeth had been murdered in was still boarded up, and that the body was still inside. With the help of a few friends, he opened the room and was shocked by what he found. The body of Elizabeth Cooper was still there, just as it had been over 100 years ago. But that wasn't the only thing he found. As he continued to investigate, he uncovered a number of other disturbing things, including a bloody axe that was hidden in the rafters of the house. With the discovery of the body, Father Hugh knew that he had to take action. He contacted the local authorities and told them what he had found. To their credit, the police were quick to respond, and they arrived at the house within minutes. They carefully removed the body from the room and took it away for burial. As soon as the body was gone, the strange activity in the house seemed to stop. David and his family were finally able to live in peace, and the house was finally able to be sold to new owners who didn't have to worry about a ghost. These days, the house where Elizabeth Cooper was murdered stands as a reminder of the city's violent past. It's now known as the Cooper House, and it's open to the public as a museum. Visitors can explore the rooms where Elizabeth died and learn about the story of the axe murder that shocked London. Some say that the ghost of Elizabeth still haunts the house, but thankfully, she's no longer a threat to anyone. And that's the story of the murder room that no one sleeps in. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up, comment below, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. We'll see you next time. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to tell you a spooky story about an attic full of whispers. This comes from a Bridget. The original poster writes that she is house-sitting for her aunt and uncle while they go on vacation. They've recently moved in after getting married, and the house has a lot of weird stuff, like old wedding dresses in the closet, hundreds of dollars lying around. But the weirdest thing is the attic. It has so much stuff crammed into it that you can barely walk through it. And there are hundreds of whispering voices up there. Op was told not to go up there, but since she had been hearing the whispers too, she decided to investigate. Now, when I read stories where the main character ignores explicit instructions to stay away from something, I have to roll my eyes every time. Because come on, don't do that. If your aunt and uncle specifically told you not to go into the attic, because there are dangerous spiders, or rabid bats, or whatever, you should listen to them, right? Especially if you have no reason to think that they're lying to you. But apparently OP was just too curious, so she went up there anyway. As soon as she opened the door, she heard footsteps behind her, and turned around, but there was no one there. She tried to call out, but her voice sounded muffled like under a blanket. As she continued walking deeper into the attic, she started to panic because everything was covered with cobwebs, and it was getting harder to breathe. Then she spotted a rocking chair moving by itself, and got scared enough to start screaming. At this point, I have to wonder why she didn't just turn around and leave. I mean, I get it. She probably thought that if she ran away, whatever was in the attic would follow her. But still, there was an exit, wasn't there? Maybe she should have tried that. Anyway, the rocking chair stopped abruptly, and she could hear whispering again, and this time she understood what they were saying. They were talking about how they couldn't wait to get their hands on her, and how they hadn't had fresh meat in a long time. And then she saw them. Hundreds of little gray faces peering at her from the rafters. She screamed and ran to the stairs, but it was too late. Something had already latched onto her ankle, and as she struggled to free herself, she realized it wasn't flesh that she was feeling, but thread. Thousands of tiny threads wrapped around her leg and pulled her toward the whispers in the attic. She kicked wildly until she felt something snap, and she tumbled down the stairs. When she got up, she ran out of the house as fast as she could, only stopping when she was several blocks away. She tried calling 911, but her leg buckled and she passed out. The next thing she knew, she was waking up in a hospital bed. She was confused at first, not remembering anything about the previous night. But then she looked down and saw that her legs were bandaged from her ankle to her knee. The doctor explained that she had somehow managed to break her kneecap and had crawled all the way to the hospital before passing out on the sidewalk. He had no idea how she had done that, since she had no recent surgery and all of her bones were completely dry. When she went home, she told her aunt and uncle what had happened. They were very upset and promised to take her to a therapist. But she knew that something else was going on here. So the next day, she called the police and told them about the whispering attic. They thought it was pretty funny and said that she probably just needed to talk to someone about all the stress she has been under lately. But she insisted that something was wrong, that there really were whispers in the attic. But the cops just laughed at her and left. Then she had an idea. She told her aunt and uncle that she wanted to clean out the attic so they could finally put all that stuff into storage. And they were happy to let her do it, because they didn't want to go up there themselves. Now, normally, I would say that this is a bad idea. I mean, we've learned from horror movies that if you have a creepy old house, you don't go rummaging around in the attic or the basement. You know, things are best left undisturbed. But maybe this will turn out to be a good story, so I'm not going to try to talk her out of it. She went up into the attic and started looking around. she found a bunch of really old clothes, some of which looked like wedding dresses, and put them into a bag. Then she looked around some more and found a big old trunk. She had to use all of her strength to push it open, but eventually she managed it. Inside, she found hundreds of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. She brought the trunk downstairs and sat on the floor to look through the letters. As she did, she heard whispering again, but these voices sounded different, sadder. One of the letters fell out of the pile and landed at her feet. She picked it up, blew off the dust, and started reading. It was addressed to a William from someone named Henry, who claimed to be his brother. In the letter, Henry begged William not to make fun of him, and asked him for help with his studies. Then he told William that he had seen the others, and that they wanted to play with him. And then there was a postscript written in another hand that said, "Don't trust him, he isn't well." The signature was illegible, but it looked like it might say, "From your loving sister Mary." At this point, our protagonist started to freak out a little bit. Who were these people? What did they want? Why were they in the attic? And then she noticed something strange about the handwriting. The writing in the body of the letter was neat and precise, like a grown man would write, but the signature was childish. Whoever wrote this wasn't a kid, but the handwriting was definitely not that of an adult either. It was as though the person who signed the letter had the writing ability of a 5-year-old. Then she thought of something. The faces in the rafters, the hundreds of little gray faces. They weren't human, they were dolls. Hundreds of dolls with blank eyes staring down at her. Well, I guess they wouldn't exactly be blank anymore. The dolls must have had faces drawn on them at some point. But over time, the paint had worn off, leaving only pale gray faces behind. At this point, I'd like to point out that it seems kind of obvious that the dolls aren't real. And if that's the case, then I'd imagine it wouldn't be hard to prove. Like, surely there are a lot of wooden dolls in the world, but I'd be willing to bet that most of them have faces painted on. So if Opie takes one of those dolls and puts it under a microscope, I'm sure she'll be able to see the paint. But maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm being overly rational here. Anyway, she took one of the dolls downstairs and showed it to her aunt and uncle, but they just laughed at her and said that she should stop making up scary stories. And then they went back to their room, presumably to lock the door and hide under the bed. So Opie went back into the attic with the bag of creepy dolls. This time she took a hammer with her and smashed every single one of them. Every time she hit a doll, she could hear the whispers growing louder, more frantic, and as the last of the dolls fell to the floor, the voices suddenly stopped. Opie says that her aunt and uncle have unsaid a word to her since, and the attic is silent now. But sometimes at night she hears scratching sounds and tapping on her bedroom ceiling. So that was the story of the attic full of whispers. What do you think? Do you think the dolls were real, or were they just old-fashioned wooden dolls with paint that had worn off over time? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can do that using the links in the description. I'd like to thank all of my supporters for their generosity, and I'd also like to give a special shout out to this month's Creepypasta of the Month Club members. Thanks so much for watching, and have a nice night. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are exploring the haunted cabin in the woods. In 1984, a group of teenagers from a small town found themselves at the center of a nightmare after they stumbled across a secluded cabin deep in the woods. They had meant it to be a fun weekend getaway, but instead they were stalked and viciously murdered one by one until only 2 were left. This was no ordinary cabin. It had witnessed unspeakable horrors, and evil resided within its rotting floorboards. But where is this terrifying place today? What happened to those poor souls who met their end there? And why should you never go camping? Let's find out in today's video. Rustic cabins have long been a popular vacation choice for people seeking to escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life and commune with nature. However, some cabins come with a sinister twist. These woods are home to a dark secret that has become known as the site of unspeakable horror. Known locally as the Massacre Tree, it serves as a grim reminder of the brutal murders that occurred here years ago. On June 13, 1984, a group of friends decided to spend the weekend at a cabin located off Forest Road 610 near Center Sandwich in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. The group consisted of 6 young adults, 4 women, and 2 men. Their plan was to spend Friday night at a local bar and then head to the secluded cabin for some rest and relaxation. Their destination was an isolated A-frame cabin that had been built in 1920 and sat on nearly 20 acres of land. It was situated down a long driveway surrounded by tall trees, making it almost invisible from the road, perfect for a romantic getaway or family retreat, especially during the winter when the snow fell heavy and muffled all sound. But in this case, these 8 strangers had booked the cabin for a different kind of weekend. Upon arrival, they explored the spacious interior and cozied up for the night. The large living room boasted a massive stone fireplace and stunning views of the surrounding forest. The fully equipped kitchen made it easy for them to prepare meals, while the bedrooms provided plenty of space for everyone to get a good night's sleep. But as darkness fell, the atmosphere changed. Strange noises echoed through the trees, and unsettling shadows danced on the walls. The friends tried to ignore it, chalking it up to their imaginations. After all, it was just an old cabin in the woods. but they soon realized that something was very wrong. As the night wore on, the friends began to experience strange and terrifying events. Unexplainable footsteps echoed through the empty halls. Doors slammed shut on their own, and whispers seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Fear turned to panic when they discovered a hidden room filled with disturbing artifacts. The friends were horrified and desperate to escape the cabin, but they soon realized that they were not alone. The next morning after, they decided to leave and return home, but upon stepping outside, they were met with a horrifying sight. All of their cars had been destroyed, leaving them stranded in the middle of nowhere. As they attempted to flag down passing motorists for help, it became clear that they were being stalked by an unseen presence. Every time they stopped, someone would vandalize their vehicles, making it clear that they were not welcome in this part of the woods. And then the attacks began. One by one, the friends were picked off in brutal fashion, their bodies found mutilated and drained of blood. The killer remained elusive, striking when they least expected it and vanishing without a trace. Panic spread through the group as they realized that they were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. With their phones destroyed and no way to contact the outside world, the friends were forced to confront their fears and fight back against their attacker. But it was too late. The cabin had claimed another victim. As the body count rose, so did the fear. The friends were now terrified to even step outside, convinced that the killer was watching them, waiting for them to make a move. But they knew they had to do something before it was too late. With limited resources, they barricaded themselves inside, hoping to outlast their attacker. But the cabin seemed to be cursed. The killer managed to infiltrate their defenses, striking when they were most vulnerable. In the end, only 2 survivors remained, haunted by the horrors they had witnessed and forever changed by the tragedy that unfolded in the isolated cabin in the woods. Today, the exact location of this horrific event is unknown, but some believe it may have taken place at the now abandoned Love Lane cabin in New Hampshire. Situated on a secluded dirt road, this remote dwelling is shrouded in mystery, and locals claim it is haunted by the spirits of those who perished within its walls. Despite its dilapidated state, the cabin continues to stand, a haunting reminder of the violence that once unfolded there. Visitors who dare to venture near the property report hearing strange noises and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Some even claim to have seen the ghost of a woman in an old nightgown wandering the grounds. Whether these stories are true or simply the product of overactive imaginations, the Love Lane cabin remains an eerie presence in the community. But even if it wasn't here, what happened to the survivors? Well, the aftermath of such a horrific ordeal can be devastating and long-lasting. Counseling and therapy can help survivors cope with the trauma they have endured. Support groups can also provide a safe space for survivors to share their experiences and connect with others who understand what they have been through. In some cases, survivors may choose to advocate for victims' rights or to raise awareness about the issue in order to help others who have experienced similar trauma. However, the scars of such an event can run deep, and survivors may struggle with anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other mental health challenges for years to come. It is important to remember that healing takes time, and that there is no right or wrong way to grieve or cope with such a traumatic experience. As for those lost in the attack, their families may choose to hold funerals or memorials to honor their loved ones and say goodbye. In the wake of such a tragedy, communities often come together to support the victims and their families, whether through fundraising, vigils, or simply offering their condolences. Many will want to learn from the tragedy, calling for increased safety measures or stricter laws to prevent similar attacks from happening again. Ultimately, the impact of such an event can be felt for years to come, shaping not only the survivors, but the entire community. Now let us take a look at some other cabins that were far more than just a holiday home. First, we have to look at the Wolfman's Glen. The Wolfman's Glen is a mysterious abandoned cabin that is said to be haunted by the ghost of a woman named Elizabeth Wolf. According to legend, Elizabeth lived in the cabin with her lover, a man known only as the Wolfman. The couple was rumored to have practiced dark magic and animal sacrifice in the woods around the cabin. When Elizabeth died, she was buried in the nearby woods with a wooden stake driven through her heart, a grim detail that suggests a chilling origin story. Over the years, visitors to the site have reported hearing strange sounds and seeing apparitions in the trees. Some have even claimed to see the ghost of Elizabeth herself, searching for her lost love in the darkness. The exact location of the Wolfman's Glen remains a secret known only to a few, adding an air of mystery and intrigue to this already captivating tale. Another creepy cabin is the Devil's Tramping Ground. This mysterious clearing in North Carolina has long been the subject of local legends and folklore. It is said that the ground beneath the tramping ground is cursed, causing anyone who steps foot inside to be trapped forever. Some believe that the tramping ground is actually a portal to hell itself, while others believe that it is the home of a demonic entity known as the Devil. There have been numerous reports of strange activity in the area, including unexplained lights, strange animal sounds, and even the occasional sighting of demonic figures. Many of the legends surrounding the trapeze ground date back centuries, with Native Americans telling tales of a cursed area in the woods that was best avoided. While there is no evidence to support these claims, the mystery of the trapeze ground continues to captivate people's imaginations. Finally, let's look at Hill House. Hill House was the setting for Shirley Jackson's 1959 novel The Haunting of Hill House, which is widely regarded as one of the greatest ghost stories ever written. The house is said to be haunted by a number of ghosts, including the former caretaker and his wife, as well as several children who died in a fire on the property. In the story, a group of paranormal investigators rent the house for the summer in order to study its strange and terrifying phenomena. However, they soon discover that the house is more sinister than they could have imagined. The house is said to be sentient, with its own evil will that delights in tormenting its inhabitants. As the story progresses, the characters are tormented by apparitions, moving objects, shaking beds, disembodied voices, and other terrifying occurrences. Ultimately, the house claims its victims, leaving only one survivor to tell the tale. So what do you think of these creepy cabins? Which one would you want to explore? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more short videos, stay tuned for more content. Thanks for watching.